Hello and welcome to the latest gardening video on our channel. This one is a bit different as it takes a close look at what is one of those thorny issues for many people, how to find time to garden in what can often be hectic, busy lives. We have had tiny town gardens ourselves and helped garden a huge variety of other people's gardens whilst woofing in the past before moving here. No matter how big or small your garden, it requires time to be cultivated. No cultivation and it will inevitably revert to nature. Even a wild garden presumes some degree of human intervention and order. So the more time the gardener has to be in their garden space, the more rewarding the activity. In our experience anyway, but busy lives are sometimes unavoidable. Work, families, volunteering, home maintenance, other hobbies. There are so many important reasons why we put off our gardening. And to be honest, scrolling on our phones and other devices can also eat up huge amounts of time. In this video, we take a very personal look at how we find time for gardening in our organic garden on a steep hillside in the Upper Severn Valley near Llanidloes in mid Wales in the UK. First, let's look at some of our do's and don'ts in relation to how much time we have for our garden. There are some very basic facts about our lives which inevitably free up some gardening time for us. We don't have a television. We haven't had one for over 30 years now. We do listen to the radio a lot, and I mean a lot, especially BBC Radio 4. Well, Gardener's Question time is an absolute must every week for starters. The beauty of listening avidly to the radio is that other tasks can be carried out at the same time, which frees up more time to be in the garden either before or later. We don't read daily newspapers, either paper ones or online. We do use print newspapers to start our log fires though, so admit that other people's reading matter is a vital component of our lives. We try very hard not to install distracting apps on our phones. Facebook, for example. We're not perfect, so some creep onto our devices. YouTube and that brilliant app for identifying birdsong, and the other one that scans food items and warns you about the nasty additives of some. They're on there, but we do try to limit our time on all these apps because apps can eat up huge amounts of time in our lives if we're not careful. We don't go to the gym. Gardening on our steep hill keeps us fit. It saves money as well as time, as we don't have to pay a gym membership either. Plus we prefer to be outside in the fresh air, noticing the birds and other wildlife, the changes in the weather and seasons as we garden. It connects us with our surroundings and just makes us feel better. And gardening is surely much more fun than walking the gym treadmill. Our approach to gardening is quite relaxed. Some might say we are lazy in some aspects. Others would commend us for our approach as it benefits nature as well as us. So here are some of our don'ts in relation to our attitudes to gardening. We don't worry unduly about untidiness. We leave some wildflowers in spring and summer, and piles of autumn leaves are anyway a benefit to biodiversity and wildlife, as well as providing a useful mulch where they fall. We don't have rigid fixed routines. For example, the grass must be mowed every Sunday afternoon or else the world will grind to a halt. We don't really do lawns though, just messy grassy areas linking other parts of our garden, so it's easier to be relaxed in this case. We don't worry about asking for help when we need it. Some jobs are outside our skill set and others would take us much longer than necessary because of our lack of experience. So we save up and pay other people to help, like Johnny, who made our brilliant new roofed compost bins recently. Next, in our list of do's and don'ts, let's move on to what we do in relation to helping create time to garden in an organisational sense. We do organise and plan our gardening to a degree. After many years of gardening, we instinctively know when it's time to do some of the routine jobs, like disconnect the water for the winter or start sowing seed in early spring. Other jobs we can remind ourselves about. So by mid-autumn, it's time to think about planting out those tulip bulbs we carefully stored in the shed over the summer. Our our house diary is a useful place to pop a reminder. We like a paper diary, but an online calendar works just as well. Lists. There are always lists. Lists of jobs to be completed or even just started. The great joy of a list is crossing out the tasks when they have been completed. Nothing quite so satisfying. If it's a bigger job, like building a new greenhouse or shed perhaps, then this project is broken down into smaller pieces so we can take one step at a time, and somehow it all seems more manageable. We keep an online issues log of some garden as well as household tasks. Some are ongoing and we just need a gentle reminder. Others are more challenging, especially if they depend on external help, as we might need to nudge or pay or just save up in the first place. But an issues log is a great way to keep a record of what has happened, what is planned next, and also just as a reminder to get on with things if they've lapsed a bit. In the garden itself, there are practical approaches that can save time. For example, we don't like constantly replacing plants which have been chewed up by slugs and snails, so we don't bother with hostas. Instead, we have a large collection of hardy geraniums which really don't appeal to the gastropod palate at all, it seems. Apply this approach to all your planting and it saves a mass of time. Plants that thrive in this garden's particular conditions also save time. So for our acid, sandy and gravelly soils, heathers, ferns and rhododendrons are very happy. It's all about choosing the right plant and putting it in the right place. There are scores of helpful gardening books that help you make good choices at the shopping stage, if only you have time to read them. Letting plants grow big and cover the soil also means you have less weeds to take out, again saving time. And elsewhere we mulch around plants with grass cuttings, wood chip or compost to preserve moisture and keep the weeds at bay. Meanwhile, a drip irrigation system in our passive solar greenhouse saves a massive time on watering. Combine this with a programmable timer and you don't have to think about watering the covered gardening space at all. You can find out more about this greenhouse irrigation setup in a separate video, link in the description below. Quite often, the issue over lack of time to do the gardening is about an attitude or state of mind. If gardening is perceived as a chore, there will never be a good time to do it because there will always be something more interesting or enjoyable to do. As we enjoy gardening, very few of the gardening jobs are regarded as genuine chores. For us, it is generally a delight to be in the garden, and we look forward to being outdoors, in the fresh air, getting our exercise, and imposing a little of our will on nature to achieve the effects we desire. That could be a beautiful garden bed, a well-clipped hedge or prune tree in the ornamental garden, or it could be growing tasty fruit and veg, which are a delight to grow and also to eat. When gardening like this becomes such an integral part of life as a lifestyle choice, it becomes ingrained. It's a habit, and to be honest, would feel odd if it was taken away from us. Getting up early occasionally, especially in the summer, can be a great way to make gardening progress. And what a beautiful time of the day, before it's too hot and bright, you and the birds sharing your favourite outdoor space, the scents, shapes, colours and textures that make gardening so rewarding. It's good for your mental health too, especially if there's a tough day ahead when a calm, clear, positive start will really benefit. Then there are exciting garden projects to be dreamt up. It's usually easy for us to find enthusiasm for these. It goes beyond the everyday gardening and takes it to another level. Whether a new greenhouse, shed or just a new path, trying to achieve our new goal gives that extra pull into the garden. Suddenly there is all the time in the world for gardening and no time at all for anything else. When it comes down to it, it's all about enjoying gardening. If you don't, maybe it's time for that new hobby you've been tempted by for years. Ferret racing, collecting bucket hats, tying knots, learning to play the octobass. Work, of course, can be a big barrier to finding enough time for gardening. Currently, neither of us are in paid employment, but most of our current garden was created and built whilst we were both working. We just moved at the right pace. There was never any rush, and the main thing was to enjoy what we were doing. Fitting gardening around work meant occasionally gardening before work and nearly always gardening after work in the spring and summer. And if family commitments come along and take priority, which will always happen at some point in people's lives, the garden can tick over by itself until the moment is right to return. A good friend gave us some very helpful advice once when he said, as we started out, remember that gardens are very forgiving. A garden that seems at first glance to be neglected beyond hope can be brought back to life with some enthusiasm and hard graft. And if there isn't time, nature rules, and you can call it a rewilded garden. One thing which gives me hope for the future is the sheer resilience of nature. Its rapid return to a no longer cultivated space gives me hope for the future of our planet, which ultimately is a much bigger thing than us or our gardens. Perhaps the best way to think about making time for gardening is looking at it selfishly. Life, in whatever form, can often get in the way of our gardening, so when we do make it outside, it is a treat. It's me time. The more time we spend gardening in our special outdoor space, the more time we have for ourselves. Gardening is a treat, a reward. It's hard work as well, but physically exhausted after a long day outdoors with several more jobs to cross off the list, nothing is quite so satisfying. As long as we have time for gardening, we are content. Thanks for watching and happy gardening all.